we are on page 6. We already were introduced to a new formula for the distance between 2 points. How many people have memorized that formula already? In grade 12, there is no formula sheet for the AP calculus. So all the formulas you've learned all the way through, you have to have them memorized if you want to use them in grade 12 AP calculus. So suggestion is to start remembering them already. Like a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Right? Got that? Length times width is area of a rectangle. Area of a circle, pi r squared. Circumference of a circle, 2 pi r. So, as you learn a formula, you will find this. If you can remember it, it's going to be more helpful for you. And the first formula that we learned was our distance formula, which is just a squared plus b squared equals c squared anyways. But it looks like this. You take one coordinates, you take the distance between your x coordinates, the distance between your y coordinates, square root them. It's basically a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's our distance formula. Now we're going to find the midpoint formula. And you don't have to draw this down, but this is the idea. I have 1 point here and 1 point here. I could draw a line between them, and I want to find this point right in the middle of them. Can you see that you could make a triangle here as well? And does it make sense that if you want to find the midpoint between the black and the blue line, it will cut this perfectly in half, and that perfectly in half. If it's going to be in the middle, middle is like halfway between things. So we have to do halfway between the y values and halfway between the x values. Now to figure out halfway between something, let's say this went from 4 to 8 on your y values. You should be able to do half in your head really easily. What's halfway between 4 and 8? I'm muted. I'm not muted. I'm dying. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully I'm not. Hopefully I wasn't dead, but we will plug it in and have to go to the backup. Feel like singing karaoke. Not going to happen. All right, thank you for noticing that the battery was dying. Here we go. Yes. You could probably guess or just see that the middle between 4 and 8 would be 6. Right? What happens if these weren't 4 and 8? What happens? What would you do if I said the y values were harder, like 27 and 11? Not as easy to see it right away, but what kind of math could you do to figure it out?
Like, minus the bigger number by 1 and add this one.
Okay, you can minus them, so you're saying that in between here is 16. Okay, and then half the 16. Yeah. And then you could go either up 8 from this one or down 8 and figure out this is 19. Okay, does that make sense?
Wait, where'd you get that?
Well, half of 16 is 8. So if I went up 8 from 11, that would get me to 19. Or I could go down 8 from 27. That would get me to 19. And since 19 is 8 away on both sides, it's right in the middle. So we could do that as well. what we're trying to start to figure out is how to do a formula for this. Okay? So one of the ideas was subtracting these values. Okay? And then you could figure out the distance between them, cut that in half, and add it together. What happens if instead of subtracting them, okay, well, not instead of subtracting them, but let's say on your first math quiz in this unit, you got 27%. Then on the second math quiz in this unit, you got 11%. How are you doing in this unit? Not very good. What would your average be in this unit? 19%. Does it make sense that when you're that right in between the 11 and the 27 is 19%. That would be your current average in this unit. Okay? If this is making sense, your current average is probably not 19%. I should have used higher numbers, but it's more fun to sometimes use lower numbers. Okay? Your average would be 19%. Have you calculated averages before? Right? The average is the middle value of something.
You add them and divide by how many?
Yeah, the steps are you could add them together and divide by how many. So we figured out the 19 by finding the difference and then adding half. You could also find the 19 by adding them and dividing by 2. Yes?
The little green thing is
No, it's been like that for a while.
really?
Yeah. I don't think it's changed from that angle for quite some time.
They were definitely symmetrical.
You think so? I think they're both like that for some time. Yeah? Did you notice that?
Yeah. Like that since last
It's been like that since last year. Yeah.
Mine.
Okay. So, this idea, now if I give you the x value, if I said you went from 10 to 90, what's the middle value there? 50. Could you do the same methods? Could you figure out that 50 by adding them up and dividing by 2? Could you figure out that 50 by saying the distance between these is 80, half of 80 is 40, so I could go 10 plus 40 and get 50, or I could go 90 minus 40 and get 50. So now we have two different ways to figure out the middle. And we're going to decide which one we like as a formula better. So let's say instead of numbers, I'm going to call this point, I'm going to call this point x1 and y1, and this point x2 and y2. And we're going to figure out the formula for the x coordinate right here. We could do the same thing with the y, but it's identical. If we can do it with the x coordinate, then we could do it with the y coordinate. Can you see that? So one of the things that we figured out is we said, okay, it goes from x1 here to x2 there. And when we did the numbers, we decided that one way that we could figure it out is an average. If you wanted the average, you add two things up and divide by 2. So this would be the average way with add x1 and x2 and divide by 2. The other way that we did it was we calculated the difference, right? The difference was 80 before, cut that in half, and added it to 10 or subtracted it to 9. So we could do, I'll call that method the difference method. We would have to do x2 minus x1 to find the difference. We took that difference and divided it by 2, and then we added that to x1. Those are both correct formulas. And yet on your formula sheet, you have a formula for midpoint. So mathematicians chose one of those ideas to write their formula. Which one do you like better? The average one?
Average one.
Do they both make sense, though? We did them with numbers. They should both make sense. But isn't the average one like a little bit nicer formula? And so your midpoint formula is just the average of your x values and the average of your y values. And it's on your notes package there below. But what we just did was we just went through the process of how does a formula get made. Someone has to think about it, and it has to make sense. And if this formula makes sense to you, that a midpoint is averages, your chances of remembering it by the time you get to grade 12 AP Calculus are very good. If you just decide, I'm going to memorize this formula, and it doesn't make sense to you, chances of remembering it are very bad. So we always try to have things make sense to us, because it helps us not only do the questions, because you're like, I don't know, if you've done math and you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. It's pretty easy, right? And you've probably done math and you're like, this makes no sense to me. And then you can't even start. So let's do these examples that they've given us. Let's draw them out. Some of these are really straightforward. If you had the point 5, 3, x is first, then y, this would be 5, 3. And negative 5, 3, that would be there. I'll connect them with a blue line. I think this is one where you could just observe it.
It's -5 and -3.
Oh, that would make it, yes, thank you for noticing. That makes it a little bit harder. Okay, good. Let's get this one out of here. -5 and -3, so now, there's our blue line. We need to find the midpoint of it, okay? Drawn on the picture, you might be able to see that it's 0, 0. But can you see that the difference here is 10. The difference here is 6. Halfway will be 3 and 3, and 5 and 5. So it will be perfectly at 0, 0. Can you see that you could use the formula? If you look at your x values and added them together, what's -5 plus 5? 0. Right? This would not be a good example to use as in, you got -5 on your first quiz. You did so bad, I took away 5 marks from something else. And then on the second quiz, you got 5. So you're averaging 0 no matter what. They used to do that on some multiple choice questions. Did you know that? You would get 1 mark if you got it right. You would get -1 if you got it wrong. And you would get 0 if you left it blank. Why did they do that for multiple choice? What were they trying to get rid of? Guessing. So if they want to get rid of guessing on multiple choice, they take away a mark if you get it wrong. So if you're not certain, you're better off leaving it blank as a strategy. Should we do that on the next one? No? Okay. I didn't think you'd want to. All right, 4, -2. So this one, 4, -2 would be right there. -6, 4. If you join those together, not quite as easy to see the middle. Oh, I forgot my brackets. And I drew it in the wrong spot. Man, thank you. I'd like to say I'm doing this on purpose to see if you're paying attention, but that is not the case. I'm having issues counting. There, does that look better? -6, 4. Not as easy to see the middle of this one. But if we think about our formula, what would be the average of -6 and 4? If you add them together, get -2, divide by 2, you would get -1. Right? So I know my x-coordinate is -1. For my y-coordinate, what's the average between 4 and -2?
4 and -2, that would be 2.
Yeah.
2, 1.
So with a difference, if we add them together, you get 2. Divide that by 2, you get 1. So your midpoint on this one is -1, 1.
Once you figure out the x, though, doesn't that mean you automatically get the y, the slanted line? Once you know
Yes,
x, it has to be
unless
x.
you've drawn it, like, did you see how carefully I took a ruler to draw it? So you could draw it poorly, right? If you used a ruler, it should work out perfectly, unless your graph paper is a little bit off. So it's still better to do it algebraically and figure it out with the formula, but you're right. Once I, like my graph actually ended up being pretty good. Once I labeled the -1 for the x, I could see that the y should be +1, right? But when we're finding the midpoint, drawing a grid every single time is going to be a little bit annoying. So that's where the formula is really nice, because you can figure it out without having to draw the picture every time. You can just find the average of your x values, find the average of your y values. So try these two on your own, just using the formula. I'm going to rewrite the formula here. Sometimes it's just M for midpoint, sometimes people use MP for midpoint. Capital M. So there's our midpoint formula. I know you're probably not done, but you can check as you're going. One thing that we did with the distance formula that's good to do with the midpoint formula as well is above the points, choose this one to be your first point, this one to be your second point, and above the numbers write x1, y1, x2, y2. That just helps you, when you're going to a formula, plug in the numbers in the right spot. So I need to do x1 plus x2, -1 plus 5 divided by 2, and for the y's, -7 plus 9 divided by 2, because it's very easy to accidentally pick the wrong number when plugging into your formulas. So labeling it is very helpful. Simplifying means you're going to get 4 divided by 2, which is 2, and here you're going to get 2 divided by 2, which is 1. Did you get 2, 1 for the first one?
Yeah.
Yay! Second one, again, x1, y1, x2, y2, just to help me use the formulas right. -2 plus 5 divided by 2, and 2 plus -7 divided by 2. When we use negative numbers, often it's a good idea, I should have done on the last one, put negative numbers, add them in with brackets. And did you get 3/2 or 1.5, comma, negative 5 halves, or negative 2.5. I would actually prefer leaving numbers as fractions.
Two negative one? Oh, no, wait, no, never mind.
Oh. It's easier to do math with fractions than it is to do with decimals as you get into more and more complicated stuff. So I would leave them as fractions.
And then what was B, sorry?
I can put it back up. 3 halves and negative 5 halves.
Did you also write it as a decimal?
You could. You can write them as decimals as well, although I'm going to tell you that as you get more complicated math, fractions are going to be easier to work with. So we'll leave more answers as fractions. And now we got a variable in there, but it doesn't change the process. (10a) divided by 2 will just be 5a. Negative 6a divided by 2, negative 3. So we do a concept like midpoint. We do it with numbers, right? Then we do it with numbers that doesn't work out as nice because we had some fractions. Then we say, well, the process is the same. We could do it with variables. We could do it with like terms. We could do it with anything. All right, everybody good? 2 more examples. What would you do if you were in between? You knew that one point was 1, 3. I'll label that one in green. You knew that the midpoint was 4, 5. Can you see that the other endpoint has to be about there? How can you figure this out? Well, on the graph, I kind of measured it, okay? But again, we don't always necessarily want to measure it. One thing that I like to do on these questions with the middle is figure it out this way. Okay? If the 4 is in the middle, you have gone up 3. Would you agree? If you did that again, does it make sense that your x-coordinate should be 7? And what's happened with our y-coordinate? You've gone up 2. If you did that again, you would get 7, 7. Does that match up with where I've drawn the point? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In fact, what you are technically using, the up 3, up 2, is
The rise and the run.
the rise and the run. Right? If it's right in the middle, they would be on the same straight line. You'd have the same rise and run. You'd have the same rate of change either way. Was everybody done? Good? Okay, try this one on your own. I'm going to draw it out for you. 3, negative 2. -4, comma 1. Whoops.
Mr. JR,
Oh, I drew. Man, I'm like so struggling today, right? There we go.
Mr. JR, when you write it on the side like that, does it matter which one's first?
Yes, because
Because
this
you
one,
did it in a different order.
this one has to be the midpoint, right? The midpoint. No, I screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so wonderful. I'm having such a good day. The midpoint is -3, 2. That's the one that should be in the middle. I should just let you guys go home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
seems like we're teaching you here.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job. Like I said, if I was doing this on purpose, this would be a good thing, but there we go. That's why it's always important to like read the question again, make sure, double check yourself as you're going along. So if we do the same thing, how did you do? Did you notice to go from -4 to 3? That's going up 7. So if I went up 7 again, I should get 10.
Oh, yeah.
And in the Y's, you're going down 3. So if I went down 3 again, I would get -5. I'll draw that point to see if it makes sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I label 10 -5, does it look like the green point is right in between them? It sure does.
Can I get the option, please?
You can.